I will start our panel discussion today. Basically, this topic is very close to my heart because for me and for us at Bússola Tech, we cannot talk about legislative modernization without talking about cooperation. I mean, if the pandemic taught us anything is colleagues, they can and they should cooperate to share their expertise, either in times of emergency, such as a pandemic or any other situation that tests the strength and the resilience of parliaments, but also in times of normality as well. And this is something that we advocate, and all of you as well have a very strong work with. So this is why you have been invited to this panel discussion. And to be mindful about our time, we change a little bit the dynamics of our debate. We are not going to have the opening remarks, but I will grant each one of you around 1 minute just to introduce yourself, say who you are, your organization, and then we go towards the questions and our debate that I think is the most interesting part of our day today. So alphabetically, Anabella, would you like to introduce yourself to our colleagues?
Yes, of course, Luis, nice to see you and nice to share this panel with Frieda again, to see you, Juan de Dios, and Stacy, nice to meet you. ParlAmericas is an institution that we have worked in different spaces with many of your organizations. It's composed of the 35 parliaments of the Americas and the Caribbean. And we work in interparliamentary diplomacy, cooperation, and we have 3 main networks that prioritize our work. And this is especially, I would like to highlight the Open Parliament Network, that is where we mostly collaborate in modernization, that is so important to continue this work that started before the pandemic, but the idea is that we continue forward. So I would like to just thank you for this opportunity and continue. We'll see the word from my colleagues. Thank you, Luis.
Thank you so much, Anabella. Frieda, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you so much, Luis. And hi, Anabella. So nice to share this space with you virtually. Juan, Stacy, excellent to meet you both virtually. And thank you, Luis and Bússola Tech, for inviting me to join you all today. My name is Frieda Arenos. I'm a program director for the National Democratic Institute, or NDI, and we're a global organization focused on supporting democracy, democracy delivery, which can occur in a variety of ways, working with citizens to organize and put pressure on their governments for reform, and equally working with government officials at executive, legislative, and subnational levels and locally all over the world to help them be accountable, transparent, integrous, and effective in delivering on those demands of citizens. My team specifically, I oversee our legislative development programs and our peer-to-peer engagement programs globally. And so I'm fortunate enough to work with groups like ParlAmericas and our Open Government Partnership, our Open Partners, our Open Parliament e-network, our Open Parliament consortium, I would say. There's so many of us in this space, and Bússola as well, to connect peers across the globe and to share and learn from one another's experiences in order to develop solutions to those shared challenges that are uniquely faced, especially by legislators everywhere. I'll stop there and then looking forward to getting into our dialogue.
Thank you so much, Frieda. Dios, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you very much, Luis. Good afternoon to everybody again. Well, I am a Deputy Director of the International Center of Parliamentary Studies, Research and Foresight from the School of Government of Universidad Austral here in Argentina. So basically, we are relatively new, but not the university, but this international center. Basically, the idea was to support parliaments. We consider parliaments not just the heart of democracy, but also key to develop democracies, not just democracy, but democracies with a high level of quality. I think it's a big difference. The level of quality of our countries. So yes, and as you said, Luis, just that is very important and very linked modernization for one side and cooperation. So thank you very much for your invitation.
Thank you so much, Dios. And Stacy, would you like to share a little bit about you, about NCSL?
Sure. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be on the panel with the rest of you. I'm really looking forward to our discussions today. My name is Stacy Householder. I am with the National Conference of State Legislatures, or NCSL, and we are a national organization based in the United States that represents all 50 state legislatures as well as the territories. And our mission is to strengthen the institution of the legislature. So we work on behalf of all state legislatures to make sure that they have an equal voice to the federal government. But NCSL also has an international component, and we work with subnational parliaments across the globe to help them interact with state legislatures in the US as well. My role at NCSL is that I am the director of our leadership and our international programs, and it's been a real pleasure to partner with Bússola Tech over the past couple of years.
Thank you so much, Stacy, for participating today. My first question goes to you, Frieda. I will ask you to answer it and all the other colleagues to share their comments on your answer. I kindly ask that each of your intervention doesn't go beyond 3 minutes each. There was an unprecedented level of cooperation and collaboration between legislatures in their efforts to maintain the institutions working either remotely or hybridly, depending on the context. My question to you is quite straightforward. How can we maintain the momentum for the exchange between legislatures for institutional friendship created during the emergence of the pandemic? And why this is so important? Why keep we telling people this is important?
Thanks, Louis. I really appreciate the question. I mean, you're right. There was so much connectivity, a heightened amount of connectivity globally during the pandemic because it was forced, right? I mean, we all found ourselves in this fast environment in which we had to adapt quickly. We had to maintain communications with one another. We had to ensure that representatives could maintain connections with one another and their constituents. We had to ensure that governments at all levels could connect with one another safely, securely, and protect that information, the sanctity of that information, while also promoting and preserving free channels of open access. We had to. The benefits of peer-to-peer engagement during that time was in a crisis environment. The best way to offer advice and to support solutions is by sharing those experiences from those who are going through it in real time. We've all heard this analogy at this point, but the pandemic was like building the plane while flying it, right? We were getting new information as it was occurring, as people were dying, as people were being impacted severely. And so it meant that information had to be deliberated quickly, it had to be shared quickly, and the best way to do that, especially with varying resource levels and infrastructural levels, was to connect peers of similar contexts together so that they could share those experiences and develop solutions quickly and effectively. The way that we can maintain this momentum, I think, is by showing the continued benefits of experience sharing among peers. Anabella and I just worked together actually to put on a very large event with members from Latin America and the Caribbean. It was an amazing opportunity to bring peers from across the region together to share their experiences and talk about challenges facing democracy in the region, talking about climate resilience, talking about health infrastructure. We spoke about anti-corruption principles, curbing authoritarianism. These are challenges that are only going to grow, and legislatures are on the front lines. And so again, the best way to be able to drive solutions for reform is by connecting those folks who are equally and uniquely sitting in a position of representative power to be able to hear from one another how they're handling these circumstances. The other thing I'll say, building momentum is really showing up for one another. There are some great organizations out there that are committed to continuing to connect with one another and provide support and resilience for impacted MPs, especially in crises. I'll highlight our partners at Parliamentarians for Global Action, who support and backstop MPs who are in crisis. There are also resources that our organizations give, such as through the House Democracy Partnership, I know ParlAmericas as well, to connect with MPs who may be displaced or in acute crisis. We've been working a lot with the Rada in Ukraine, for example, to ensure that they have access to information quickly. So I think, unfortunately, as we find ourselves in a continued crisis environment, showing the benefits of peer-to-peer engagement through interactions is only going to incentivize and continue to build on the momentum for those to continue to connect.
Thank you so much, Frieda, for your answer. And just an FYI, we are going to welcome a right honorable member from the Rada of Ukraine on Thursday about their efforts to maintain their operations during the war. Anabella, would you like to share your comments in 3 minutes on what Frieda just said?
Yes, of course. And Frieda, thank you for reminding us for this meeting. This meeting was an excellent example of this peer-to-peer collaboration. And what connectivity allows us is, like, once we were in person, but then we did all the follow-up, all these great ideas that happened in person. We were able to follow up with different parliaments in this collaboration. And without a question, the pandemic offered us an extraordinary opportunity to explore avenues for collaboration and cooperation between parliaments, between parliament and parliamentarians themselves. And that meeting was an excellent example, our first, I guess, after this, like, a very Zoom world. It is imperative that the parliamentary community that was brought together during COVID find ways to further cement this spirit of hemispheric collaboration. And I think spaces continuing working together, it's the key. At ParlAmericas, we are convinced that parliamentary diplomacy is key to addressing all these hemispheric challenges and opportunities to address common goals, such as the furthering of Open Parliament agenda, the digital transformation commitments. And that's why we strive to offer parliamentarians and parliamentary staff opportunities to share successful legislative practices on digital transformation and to provide exchanges for lessons learned while building a community where participating parliaments can benefit for the expertise of one another. And I'm happy to say that we see that now it's like the modernization has arrived, and it has complemented the work that was started before. So I think now we are starting to cement and work on what it has been built before. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anabella, for your considerations. Dios, would you like to comment on that for 3 minutes?
Yes, very short, and thank you very much. I think it was very good, the presentation of Frieda and Anabella. I would like to say that there are different levels of responsibility and roles for all the organizations related to the parliamentary arena. So I think we need to distinguish in some way the capacity of national parliaments, even subnational parliaments, to improve themselves. So we can talk, for example, about rule makers and rule takers in everything, and of course also in the parliamentary arena. So I think that this is a good momentum for, in particular, for the leaders, for those who promote modernization like a natural thing, part of their essence. Those who has technology, who develop technologies and who innovate. So probably we need to think about incentives for that, and not just the parliament, but also I think it's important the international parliamentary institution networks of all kinds, as NDI and, for example, ParlAmericas, and of course the NCSL also, and a lot of institutions. I think it's important their role also. What we need is to think globally. I think it's important. All these institutions are related to the promotion of democracy and human rights and how to make a better world. So I think this momentum, yes, we have the opportunity, probably, but probably we have also very close to forget about what happened with the pandemic and to come back to normal. And normal means disconnection, you know, and people working not together with common goals, but So it's a big challenge, but it's a great momentum. I think we should, yes, work together in this.
Thank you so much, Juan and Dios. I couldn't agree more with you. Stacy, would you like to comment on that as well?
Sure, and I really agree with everything that has been said by my colleagues on the call. We've certainly seen how much people can learn from each other in the pandemic and how quickly people can adjust to different circumstances. And I do think we need to build upon that momentum. I think the momentum is growing. With a return to in-person events, we now can see how in-person events and virtual events can be complementary. You know, to Anabella's point, we have that complementary work available, and it's also giving us a lot of new ideas. It's in order to stretch those in-person meetings into further relationships that can be built for longer periods of time, I think is what we're seeing with our international partnerships and relationships. And new technology has really given us the ability to do that on a much more frequent basis and to really deepen those relationships on a global level. In fact, NCSL is really leaning in to this phenomenon and this momentum that exists currently by creating an international affiliate avenue so subnational parliaments can engage more directly with state legislatures through our organization. And that's something that we've launched and got the idea of just this past year as people started to travel again, yet didn't want to just stop at the in-person events. They wanted to build on those events and keep up that relationship throughout the year. And that's something that I think is prevalent on the global level, no matter where you are. And we now have the tools and the comfort, your people are comfortable using those tools to be able to do that.
Thank you so much, Stacy, for your final considerations. Anabella, I wanted to bring you a question now with the comments from the colleagues. Some parliaments establish themselves as global leaders in regard to the digital transformation, and not only to the highly effective digital transformation strategy, but also for a proactive interparliamentary relations office. This is a very similar question that I posed to Alicia today at the beginning of our day, but I wanted to deep dive on these with you and the colleagues. What are your recommendations for a legislative house considering the implementation of such an office, and why this is so relevant?
Well, establishing an office on international relations definitely supports the parliamentary work in many ways. For instance, a liaison to promote a further collaboration with other parliaments and international organizations like ParlAmericas, but other organizations like the ones I'm sharing this panel at a very institutional level. Those offices have a role. This is really helpful both for parliamentarians and parliamentary staff when it comes to enrich their work with other perspectives and experiences. It provides them with the opportunity to know more about the different contexts that they can learn from and to better navigate political issues that they can impact the country's international agenda. These offices, they also allow parliaments to easily benefit from capacity building trainings, study visits, and other similar activities within the region and across the globe on legislative issues and technical support. Currently, parliaments within the Americas and the Caribbean are implementing both international commitments that are adopted in the countries, as well as parliamentary efforts, such as action plans to keep fostering legislative openness, where they have seen the importance of connecting with other valuable experiences, like we were mentioning before, like Frieda kind of explained it. For example, we facilitate technical support needed to enhance their websites. That's like a simple example. These offices also facilitate interparliamentary relations through different international forums, such as ParlAmericas, for example, where joint actions can and have emerged to address common priorities and challenges within the region. Through these offices, they coordinate the international representation in parliaments by supporting not only the participation, but also providing recommendations on topics that they are being discussed in these spaces at the national, for example, and in line with diplomatic service. For any parliament that would like to create this kind of office, we would recommend to start with international commitments that the country has adopted at regional spaces like the Summit of the Americas, the Sustainable Development Goals, the Open Government Partnership, among others, and look for parliamentary institutions that are involved and actively participating in such spaces to get a better sense of the legislative actions that can be taken in the region on those topics. And finally, we would also like to recommend to work closely with the Foreign Affairs Committee to support their actions and to contribute to the implementation of the legislation that is debated in those spaces. This definitely contributes to better coordination of the country's international agenda, where the parliaments are definitely key actors to effectively adopt international commitments.
Thank you so much, Anabella. Stacy, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, I would. This was a really intriguing question for me to think about because, traditionally in the USA, international relations is handled at the federal level, but over many years, we've seen that really just isn't the case anymore, and that states are dealing with international relations on many levels, whether they're handling direct trade, they're inviting multinational businesses into their state, or perhaps they're a border state and they're dealing with water issues or a whole host of other issues that come along with being a border state. Currently, there's one state in the nation, California, where the legislative branch has international relations office. But for the other states, NCSL really serves that role for them to make those global connections for them. Due to the increasing interconnected world, but it's no longer possible for a legislator, even at the state or the local level, to really be ignorant of world affairs. So whether it's a large multinational company that has just opened a new manufacturing facility in a certain state, or you have constituents that are really concerned about rising energy costs in the state as a result of conflicts abroad, it's vital that our members, our state legislators in the United States, develop and maintain a really keen awareness of international affairs, and the most effective way of accomplishing that is by building relationships across the globe.
Thank you so much, Stacy, for your comments. Dios, I'm certainly wanted to comment on that.
Yes, thank you very much, Luis. I think that, yes, of course, we need specialized offices or department of any kind of organization inside the parliament, and not just to support the modernization process. So we can think about a special unit for modernization of the parliament. But also, I think it's key, and I think Anabella and Stacy talk about that, mentioned that to have a strong office of parliamentary diplomacy and interparliamentary cooperation, because there are some specific aspects of the international regional relationship between parliaments related to languages, different political systems, different frameworks, legal frameworks, all kind of things that you need people specialized for that. So yes, in my opinion, another thing important is not just the leadership with a clear vision about what to do in terms of digital transformation and modernization of parliaments, but also it's important to have a plural ratification of that policy inside the parliament. And it is very important, in my opinion, the role of parliamentary staffers and public parliamentary agents. I think we need to increase the support and the agenda of digital transformation. Of course, we are living a very good moment, but I think we need to do more, and probably we need to work with these different channels, not just the technological one, which is very important, but also that the one related to how to build, how to maintain, how to support all areas of Parliament, in particular modernization and digital innovation through people, a team prepared for international relations or parliamentary diplomacy, as we call it. But it's very important, but we need to intensify that. The truth is that we have a lot of activity, we have an agenda, but the agenda is not enough yet, in my opinion. We have a great opportunity, but the changes are so fast that we need to improve in some way the channels, the institutions, the tools that we use for the promotion of development for everybody, and with the role of the Parliament in the center of it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Juan and Dios, for your comments. Frieda, would you like to share your thoughts on this?
Sure. Thank you, Luis, and thank you to my colleagues. I agree with everything that's been said. Stacy, I'm glad you mentioned that this was sort of a perplexing question, because you're right, in the US Congress, we don't have an interparliamentary office that centralizes relations or engagements across borders. Instead, this is handled at various levels, right? So you could have the Foreign Affairs Committee in both chambers offering support to connect internationally. You might also have different caucuses, issue-based caucuses. For example, I'm thinking we have an Indian delegation in town, so it's fresh on my mind, but the Senate India Caucus or the House India Caucus, they can help facilitate those connections between their counterparts in different parts of the world. There's different regional caucuses, for example, but most often engagements between parliamentarians are handled by an embassy that's based in the US. It might also be handled through direct diplomatic engagement if there is potentially a contact that has been made previously on a congressional delegation. Sometimes those personal contacts can help facilitate those interactions. I'll highlight the House Democracy Partnership, which is a commission in the US Congress specific to the House of Representatives. And this is a funnel or a portal under which we can engage through official and diplomatic channels, legislature to legislature, through specific partnerships through this commission. So the way it works is that the commission itself is comprised of an equal amount of members from both major parties in the US, Democrat and Republican, and they direct funding to the US Agency for International Development that then appropriates funding to both NDI and IRI, the International Republican Institute, and we collaborate together to implement programs on behalf of the commission. The commission itself acts as a portal for us to engage international parliamentarians and connect them together on these conversations. We run peer-to-peer exchanges between US members and staff and their peers abroad every month, every year. And so this is one portal, but I highly agree that it would be wonderful if there was an official channel, because it does improve cross-cultural competency and awareness, connectivity across borders. And again, especially as we find ourselves in crisis contexts, being able to act quickly with one another is imperative.
I subscribe to everything you just said, Frieda. I just say that. Stacy, I'd like to bring you a question now. One of the areas, as we're discussing, of legislative cooperation, both nationally and internationally, is the digitalization and the digital transformation of the legislative institution, focusing on how to empower the legislature's capacity for the betterment of the lawmaking process, citizen engagement, openness in the institution. And I will give you a spoiler on the work of NCSL, that you have an incredible work on Elites. That's a group that works with all 50 states in the United States of America, connecting people working with the modernization of the institutions at the state level. So I think it's important to recognize this work, the work of Pam Greenberg leading this effort. Based on that, and according to your experience, what are the main areas of interest of the partner legislatures in your network in promoting their digital transformation or their modernization as a larger scope?
Yeah, thanks, Luis, and thanks for pointing out Pam too. She's a true gem and a true national expert on these legislative technology issues that have cropped up over the past 2.5 years. I don't think I'm surprising anyone by saying that state legislative institutions are slow to change. I'm not sure that would come as a surprise to really anyone, and really for good reason, because democracy is a deliberative process. But the pandemic really threw our state legislative institutions for a loop, because they had to accelerate the use of technology in order to continue to do the business of the people and to get to keep their state on track. So the pandemic accelerated a few things, and I wanted to point out some of the main things that have been taken into consideration and are among the sharing of state legislatures in this moment in time. And one is that there was a massively increased awareness of IT. It increased legislators and staff awareness of the significance of technology in the legislative process, which I think was sort of accepted, but maybe not realized how important it was or could be to the future of democracy. And this includes, internally creating and passing bills, as well as public-facing interactions. And number two, it bolstered support from legislative staff and legislative leadership for more institutional continuity and the future of technology planning for state legislatures. So that's what we've seen as the real outcome, and where we've seen states start to engage and exchange information. There are many areas of interest, and I really wanted to share just a few. First, in internal functionality, many states did not have the capacity for any kind of employment verification electronically before the pandemic. States like Illinois, for example, started to use E-Verify and digital onboarding in order to keep legislatures functioning and in order to keep staff in those legislatures to help them function. Massachusetts also started to use a digital onboarding to introduce new and needed positions like HR, human resources, and diversity, equity, and inclusion positions. And then second, the mass adoption of technology applications for use in order to continue and increase public participation in the legislative process. So for example, Utah kind of seamlessly integrated tech applications in all of their committee rooms in order to allow public testimony from afar. Before the pandemic, you had to physically come to the Capitol in order to do that. So this really expanded access to the democratic process in state legislatures. A clear theme is that now that states are returning to in-person deliberations and lawmakers are back in the Capitol, they don't appear to be backtracking on public participation and public comment. Now that the avenue of Zoom or remote testimony has been opened, we don't see that closing anytime, which I think is a win for democracy. And then lastly, we see legislatures looking to the future for the next digital transition. This is where that future-looking IT comes into play, and we see states communicating with each other about the need for biometric technologies in order to secure the legislative process in the next 1 to 5 years. So for example, what kind of face recognition do we need to start implementing? Fingerprint ID, things like that. And then 29% of states actually think that artificial intelligence will come into play in the next 2 to 5 years as well, in order to streamline legislative processes and to enhance security at state capitals. So those are some of the things that we're hearing from our members, and that I'm sure are happening around the globe as well.
Thank you so much for your answer, Stacy. Dios, would you like to comment on that?
Yes, thank you very much. First of all, I would like to say that it is very important to promote interparliamentary cooperation, not just between, for example, parliaments in a different region than ours, but also at the interior of our nations, like the case of the United States with the NCSL. It's not very common sense to be thinking about promoting relationship outside our country when we have and we need the improvement of our state legislatures. So that's very important. So we need to do it at all levels. And this is important also think for example, the European Union and what happened with the experience of each one of the national parliaments and the European Parliament. The level of cooperation is so big. There is the Lisbon Treaty and all the regulatory frameworks promoting that. And as Anabella said, it's the Foreign Affairs Committee, the one who is in charge of promoting this relationship between parliaments. And that's because of the desire of integration. So I think we need to also to think about that. If we really want to integrate our societies and parliaments, depending the region and so on, and then we will see the level of cooperation and the level of exchange of best practices and technologies and so on. In my opinion, this is a win-win thing. Because it's not only a benefit for those parliaments that needs to develop better and to do it better and to incorporate a new technology, but also is a very important opportunity for those parliaments with more capacities, with more empowered. And I give you an example, and it's related, I think, with all the organizations present here. In particular, for example, NDI, but could be the others also. For example, in the case of interparliamentary cooperation, there is a huge benefit for example, NDI, because of the image of the United States. We are talking here about public diplomacy, so the way you transmit to audiences and particularly politicians and parliaments. That's basically how it was created, HDP, the House Democracy Partnership. What the job that they do, and as of course, NDI and IRI and other institutions is wonderful. Of course, it's a huge benefit. I can say it because of Argentina, our experience. We received from NDI and IRI and other HDP also. Wonderful experiences, for example, related to, Congressional Research Service or the Congressional Budget Office or all kind of institutions that the Freedom of Information Act, and of course also in related to digital transformation. So I think it's a benefit, a win-win for everybody. Probably we need to prioritize some things because this is not a question of trying to prevent, Parliament from becoming obsolete, but in particular, in my opinion, to lead changes, to increase prestige and benefit of everybody. So we are talking about here about, again, I would like to say this again, we are talking about the capacity of our parliaments to improve our democracies, and I think that all these institutions were created. There are plenty of examples. For example, the Westminster Foundation for Democracy. We have the German foundations, for example. I don't know, Hans Seidel, Konrad Adenauer. We have also the multilateral organizations, not just the UN, but the multilateral financial organizations at World Bank, IDB, IMF. And of course, when we talk about cooperation for development, what I in my opinion, we need to do is to focus again on parliaments. And we need to invest on parliaments and in interparliamentary cooperation, and particularly in digital transformation. Think just about artificial intelligence and everything that is happening right now. It's not the future, it is the present, so we need to improve that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dios, for your considerations. Frieda, would you like to comment on that?
Sure. And thank you again. I've really enjoyed listening to the different perspectives and sharing the different examples from our partners. I have a lot of thoughts on this because from my perspective, we receive a lot of requests for digital transformation, and especially through peer experience sharing. And as Juan Dios mentioned, HDP is a way in which we can offer that support. Recently, we developed, and I can share this with Luis so that he can share with everyone who's watching, we developed a cybersecurity guide for parliamentarians to basically look at the ways in which you can maintain digital connectivity of all your legislative business and systems, but do it safely and do it securely, and ensure that the sanctity of your information, whether you're in a committee hearing, whether you're voting, or whether you're trying to have a sensitive conversation with a constituent, it ensures that your information is safe and protected. So that's one resource. We've also developed a curricula and a guide for parliamentarians on detecting, analyzing, and combating disinformation. So again, as I'm sure there's been much conversation about this topic over the course of the event, but as we continue to rely on or utilize digital systems more, you also open yourselves up to the threats of disinformation. And so being able to provide, especially legislators, right, because they're a unique culture, they have a unique responsibility, they share the same mandates, being able to guide them and how to understand and analyze and combat disinformation is really critical. So those are a few resources that we've offered. I will say just during the pandemic, in terms of the information that was shared and certain innovations that were offered, I saw a lot of innovations with regards to how members were connecting with their citizens, whether it be through increased engagement, right? Members were able to do virtual town halls, for example. They were able to connect with a lot more people at flexible times that would work for people. We saw, that working mothers and families, or those with family care responsibilities, or other care responsibilities, were able to join virtual engagements because it allowed the flexibility for them to do so. We saw innovations also in being able to capture more legislative business and transcripts, whether it be through a plenary session or hearings or other business meetings. The ability to capture this digitally and to listen back to the dialogue because it was being taped has helped a lot of people, especially through an accessibility lens as well, being able to translate, ensure that the information is presented in different languages for those of different abilities or with disabilities. This is important, and it's going to become increasingly important as we move forward, ensuring that our systems are adaptive to individuals of all backgrounds, accessibilities, and education levels. And I'll throw gender into that as well. Because women don't always have access to as much education or resources in utilizing digital technology. Same with marginalized communities. And so I need to just kind of add that in there and underscore it because it's so critical. I'll leave you on this. I can't tell you how often I take for granted the fact that we can use a Zoom platform with multiple language interpretation. And I'm so used to it now. I do it almost every day. I can't tell you how often I'm still hearing from some of my US American colleagues who have yet to use a Zoom platform with simultaneous interpretation. We still are instructing folks who are coming on. It's continuing to, the fact that we're continuing to socialize this with our colleagues in the US Congress is wonderful. I think it's so important. And it's great to know that we have this access, and Zoom, luckily, they included relay interpretation, that function. Thank goodness. For 2 years into the pandemic, we didn't have it, but thinking about accessibility, I think, is a really important point here. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Frieda. Anabella, would you like to close this round?
Yes. Yes, I learned so much from everybody. I just don't know where to start, but I will say that digital transformation is slowly becoming a priority in the region, just because I know we talk about different countries, but I just want to say in the region. And one example is the Summit of the Americas that included digital transformation as one of the key thematic areas. That I just will mention that it was greater cooperation around the issues as affordable and universal broadband access to the internet, digital literacy, cybersecurity, cross-border data flow, and privacy. So this is important just to show that that the connectivity, and this is an issue. And like Stacy was mentioning before, Parliament, clearly COVID-19 clearly created an unprecedented challenge, making critical decisions in times of crisis in an efficient, they had to react in an efficient, effective, and timely manner, as well as adapting to fulfill their role and continue exercising their functions of representation, legislation, and oversight. But without neglecting that the levels of connectivity across the region were not the same. It's like we were mentioning like interpretation, but other people have trouble just putting the camera on. Like Juan Dios was saying, was reminding us, this is not the same. Like the reality is not the same for the parliament. So, but the positive thing is that we have been seeing a progressive adoption of digital technologies, both by parliaments at the institutional level and by parliamentarians in the day-to-day interaction, and has opened new and interesting ways of understanding what it means to be a parliamentarian and what it looks like to represent constituency in the era of digital modern innovation. In ParlAmericas, we have been advocating for the digital transformation agenda in parliaments, such as a tool to connect parliamentarians in a new and innovative ways with the constituents that I know you mentioned, because it's important and to connect with their own citizens, but also with parliamentarians in the region and involving a wide range of actors at a global, regional, national levels. And parliaments in the Americas and the Caribbean should be at the forefront of some of the global discussions and around level issues as climate change, sustainable development, gender equality that we mentioned, and democratic governance. And this is an opportunity that we have for them to be part of those discussions. So we believe that parliaments are increasingly becoming more aware of how central the digital transformation in the agenda is to become a parliament a more in-tune institution, more receptive to the needs of the empowered citizens, and understanding the importance of building closer relationships between the parliaments and the citizens, and strengthening their trust with their representatives. And this is important because we're providing the parliament with tools to be part of these global discussions. So I think it's amazing, all the step forward that we have been. If we look backwards, it's amazing, all the things that we have accomplished.
Thank you so much, Anabella. There's so much you have shared in this round. I would just try to summarize on something that we believe as a core value here at Bússola Tech. We try not to distinguish between national parliaments and subnational legislatures. We try to think as a legislative power. I mean, how can a legislative power globally, it doesn't matter for us if it's the State Assembly of California, if it's the House of Representatives in Argentina or in the US or in Brazil. I mean, how can these colleagues cooperate? Because, okay, they have different rules of procedure, different political landscapes, different institutional culture, but what they are doing is exactly the same. Parliament and legislature do exactly the same thing, no matter the country. So how can we help them to cooperate, and how can we share these expertises? And this gives me a line for my final question, and I will direct this question to Juan de Dios. I'm seeing we are almost on time. I kindly ask if you can, all of you can be a little bit briefer in these answers. That during the pandemic, we have seen, as we discussed to exhaustion here in this panel, we have seen an unprecedented level of cooperation between staff and peace from different legislatures, either national or subnational level. And there were so many cases that one's failure was not repeated because of direct sharing of expertise. How can our usual suspects, as we call it, those legislatures that are digital savvy, and for the digital transformation in the legislative, how can it provide guidance on the technical and cultural expertise to other legislatures yet reaching this digital maturity? Juan Dios, would you like to answer that?
Yes, thank you very much for the question, Luis. I think it's very good. First of all, yes, the pandemic was a huge impact for everybody, for all kinds of institutions, particularly for parliaments. But I would like to say and to think together about what happened before the pandemic with the remote meeting sessions, committee sessions, etc. So I think it's important to look at the society and what happened with the incorporation of technology by the people in the streets, you know, in the companies, in the NGOs, so in general, and what happened with public sector in general and parliaments in particular. So I think the real challenge is just try to be at the level of society. Could be a gap, but not the huge gap that we used to be. It was very, very common. Now we are talking about like the great successful of our parliament like updating our systems and incorporating and implementing remote functioning. But the truth is that it was there. It was being used by society, and we didn't do it because of cultural question, for different reasons. So I think it's very important for Parliament to be future oriented. That's very important, to try to see what is going to happen in the future, to try to, to anticipate the future as everybody's doing that. So, of course, there will be a need to support those parliaments without or with limited capacities. That's key. So I think it's a question of solidarity, but also it's a win-win relationship, as I said before. I would like also to say that the role and responsibilities are not just and opportunities are not just in the head of national parliaments, subnational parliaments, and international parliamentary institutions of all kinds, but also in civil society, because Bússola Tech is a wonderful example. And for example, all kind of crowdsourcing experiences like OCR Hellenic Team or others. If parliaments are not going to lead all this change, the people is going to do it in some way, because we all know how important are parliaments for having laws, quality laws, quality of parliamentary oversight, which is key also, a good budget and all that. And just one more thing to think about it. For example, the social networks. When we talk about the need, to be close to the people, to be open parliament and all that, and it's very common to talk about social networks. Social networks were creating and designed, not thinking about parliament. So we need to be innovative. We need to create our own platforms, thinking about the parliamentary function. We are experts in parliament. We know what are we talking about, what we need, how to be better, how to be closer to the people. So that's something very important. There are very good examples like open law systems, with different channels, with a warranty, for example, of the who is exchanging or being part of a dialogue with MPs or of the parliamentary staffers, and not as happened in most of the the social networks that with the anonymity, sorry about that, but with the impossibility to identify who is in the other side, we don't have good dialogues and enrichment of the relationship between politicians, parliamentarians, and the people. No, what we have is the opposite to that. So we are obstructing or limiting the possibility to have a good democracy. I think we need to orient that to think about values, to think about how to make at the end a better democracy, because the end of the road, technology is wonderful, but with a goal. The goal is to have better democracies.
Thank you so much, Juan Dios. Frieda, would you like to share your thoughts on this?
Absolutely. And I couldn't agree more. I mean, being able to connect with constituents and citizens, that's what this is all about, right? The engagement that you have with one another, even in an intergovernment sense, if we're talking executive to legislative to subnational, all of us here understand this. It's for the purpose of delivering on democracy. And so I'm so thankful you highlighted that. I can't agree more. One thing I wanted to just raise in terms of the usual suspects and those who are offering, guidance to one another and how we can incentivize guidance being passed along is we have to also kind of evaluate our own expectations on what constitutes the usual suspects in digital innovation, because this is dependent on culture, it's dependent on resources, it's dependent on what is innovative in different systems based on how people can access information. And so I think we need to push ourselves as implementers and as assistance partners in bringing those into the conversation who may not have access to such resources and may not be part of the conversation because we may consider different levels of innovation based on our own perspective and experience working with legislatures globally. And so I'll just say, and I'm saying this to myself as much as to everyone, pushing our own boundaries and expectations for what constitutes digital innovation, because it is different based on our own experiences. But thank you again. I couldn't agree more with Juan de Dios's sentiments here.
Thank you so much, Frieda, for your comments and for your participation. Stacy, would you like to comment on that?
I would, and Frieda, you know, I had the same reaction to Juan's comments as you did, in that it really hit home, and that, you know, previous to the pandemic, that some of these things were available, but we didn't necessarily embrace them because of the culture of legislatures around the globe. And I think that that's so true, that now now our eyes have been opened. And I think something that can be shared among legislatures at any level, national or subnational, is not only that access can be different, but that perhaps trying something new isn't so scary as we once thought it was. And I think that that's a really important point to share around the globe. But really, you know, this question really hits the heart of what NCSL's mission is, and that is to share information amongst not only state legislatures in the US, but globally as well. And we regularly have topics and webinars and meetings where people of different professions in legislative environments can come together and share this information, and hopefully avoid some failures that others have experienced, and others can then use that advice to avoid it. But really identifying these ideas for best practices, understanding that every single legislature, while they do similar functions, is coming from a different perspective, and is coming from a different maybe ability level or access level, but yet that information sharing is still incredibly valuable, no matter where your legislature is at.
Thank you so much, Stacy, for your comments. Anabella, would you like to close this round and close our debate today?
Yes, for sure. And Juan, it's so true what you were talking about, connectivity, and Stacy and Frieda also mentioned that. And it's true, the pandemic clearly put that our lives are so interconnected. The complexity of the challenges we face and all the problems, it's not limited to our borders. And I think that that's one important lesson. So parliamentary diplomacy and interparliamentary cooperation will become increasingly necessary as we realize that global and hemispheric issues demand collective solutions, that they're drawn from innovation, from exchange of experience like you all, and we are all working on the direction, and from democratic dialogue that brings about diverse stakeholders. And this is where we need to keep this momentum that will entail insisting on the importance of establishing spaces that enable collaboration among parliaments and allow reimagining of better ways to advance transformation of this agenda of digital innovations in parliaments. I think spaces like this one, Luís, conference that gather key actors will help to keep this discussions alive, as well as converge interesting experiences and innovative ways to address common priorities and also the challenges that we face in the Americas. And we have to keep working to keep these spaces strong, to be learning from each other, from one another. I think that that's very important to keep in mind. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anabella. So sadly, we reached the end of our debate today.